All right. Thank you so much, Hannah, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. And I just want to echo everything that Hannah said. It's really a treat to be able to share today with all of you. And I'm very much looking forward to spending some time getting to know members of the community. I'm excited to be able to speak with you today and to learn from and to be inspired by our speakers and by our community joining from all over the world. As Hannah said, I'm Mike's co-CEO. I've been with the company for about 4 years, but joined Mike full-time a little over a year ago. Previously, I'd been chief operator and business officer at GitHub, going back to the Series A and helping to build it through the Microsoft acquisition. And it's been such a treat over the last 12 months, getting to know the company better, getting to know its community in a more deeper way. And as Hannah said, 'tis the season for reflecting on what we've learned in 2024. And I thought that it might be valuable and interesting to share some of those observations with all of you that I've had as I've onboarded really here at Observable. Whether it's D3, plot, or framework, which we shipped earlier this year, since our founding, Observable has been committed to open source and to the global community of data visualization practitioners, students, teachers, and developers who are advancing the state of the art. We take our responsibility as stewards of that community seriously and look forward to many more years of supporting and growing it. Since it was launched in December of 2015, D3 has been downloaded over 1.5 billion times and averages over 1 million downloads per day. It's a testament not only to the power of Mike's vision, as well as to the strength and consistent demand for tools that promote the development of powerful, expressive, differentiated visualizations. And more, our interest is in minimizing the time spent debugging or in documentation and freeing you up to explore and learn from your data. Earlier this year, my daughter read a 19th century Victorian book named Flatland, subtitled A Romance of Many Dimensions, very whimsical, I think, title by similarly whimsically named author or teacher named Edwin Abbott, which I'm sure some or many of you in attendance have read. It was published in 1884. And for those of you that haven't read it or would like to be reminded, it's a story about a two-dimensional world inhabited by geometric figures that are known as flatlanders. Women are line segments while men are polygons with various numbers of sides, some kind of subtle or not so subtle Victorian patriarchy or misogyny there. The narrator is a square and a member of the cast of gentlemen and professionals, and he walks the reader through life in a two-dimensional world. Square dreams at one point of visiting a one-dimensional world called Lineland, inhabited by men consisting of lines, while the women in Lineland they're referred to as lustrous points. And these points and lines are unable to see Square as anything other than a set of points on a line. Following that vision, Square is visited by a sphere, a three-dimensional object coming to visit him in his two-dimensional world. And similar to the points in Lineland, Square is unable to see the three-dimensional object as anything other than a circle or a disk. And the sphere then levitates up and down through Flatland, allowing Square to see the circle expand and contract between great circles and small circles. The sphere then tries to convince the square of the third dimension that it comes from by dimensional analogies. A point becomes a line becomes a square, but Square is unable to comprehend the third dimension. So Sphere resorts now to deeds, to actions. He gives information about the insides of the house, which in a two-dimensional world is a completely new idea. He moves, or it moves, a cup through the third dimension and even goes inside of Square for a moment. Now, the book ostensibly at the time was meant to be a satire of Victorian solidified sedimentary society and the strata that and the rules that went along with that. But it's become really important as a work exploring this idea of dimensionality and the fact that typically we are unable to see, or not typically, physically, we are unable to see beyond the event horizon set by those dimensional limitations. In the hands of the data visualization developer, we're able to overcome these dimensional restrictions, to contort time, space, and matter in order to see beyond the limits of our own perception. With excellent data viz, we can step outside of the impositions of our senses and not only get a glimpse of the ineffable, but to reveal its patterns and discern its rules. So where are we here in December of 2024? We've made it to December somehow. And as I look back on the state of data visualization from some frontline, I thought that it would be good to just think about what we've learned and to share some of those observations with you. And it's not so much an attempt to predict what technology is going to happen in 2025, but rather I think I'm more interested in sounding a clarion call of the necessities and opportunities that exist in the space, and that we collectively, as a community of practitioners, wonks, data experts, students, novices, and consumers of data, what must we take into account as we move forward? The issues confronting individuals, businesses, and communities relating to data are vast and daunting. The gap between the scale of data that is being created, collected, some might say hoarded, and society's ability to decipher and understand that data has never been larger. The risks associated with this gap threaten not just teams, projects, and businesses from obtaining clear insights and understanding of their data, but pose a material and significant threat to our global institutions, to our civics, personhood, democracy, and to the effective role of individual and collective action in the face of novel and accelerating changes and challenges. Over the last 12 months, I've met with any number of data analysts, visualization developers, teams, and companies operating at varying levels of scale and data sophistication. There is not one that I've met during that time that felt assured as to the solidity or foundation of their data culture, best practices, or that didn't suffer from some level of FOMO with respect to the insights hiding in their midst. For those of you, I rewatched an episode of Seinfeld recently where he's got it's one of the early ones where he's still doing the stand-up bits, and he starts talking about soda commercials and how he thinks he must be drinking his Sprite incorrectly, because in the commercials they're drinking the Sprite, they're playing volleyball, they have all this energy, they're having a great time, they're having a party. And I think that in a lot of my conversations with business leaders and team leaders, maintainers, et cetera, that there's a similar sense of, well, maybe this is working great for somebody else, but it's not quite giving me the insights that I was promised. So why is that? And where are we? And what do we believe at Observable to be true? At Observable, we begin from the fundamental premise that data visualization is a human endeavor. It's a human expression and a manifestation of a primordial human desire to better understand the world and to communicate that understanding to others. As Professor Tufte writes in the seminal Visual Display of Quantitative Information, at base, graphics are instruments for reasoning. Often the most effective way to describe, explore, and summarize a set of numbers, even a very large set, is to look at pictures of those numbers, which is a fascinating paradox. There are some within the broader tech community and technology community who take solace in the fact that the planet may someday be inherited by our AI or robotic progeny that won't need pictures in order to make sense of what's going on beneath the surface. I am not one of those people. I consider myself to be a humanist. I'm interested in optimizing conditions for greater human success and greater human advancement, which is what Observable itself is committed to. Humans will need visualization to meet and to understand the world around them. Seeing a problem is to understand it better, which is a necessary precondition to doing something about it. Of all the methods, and this is another quote from Professor Tufte, which I quite like, of all of the methods for analyzing and communicating statistical information, well-designed data graphics are usually the simplest, and again with this paradox, at the same time, the most powerful. This is a fundamental assumption that I take into the coming year. PEBCAC, second, for all of the millions and millions of dollars that have been invested over the past decade in data infrastructure, data lakes, data pipelines, data meshes, data metaphors, and databases, a relatively trivial amount has been invested on the data front end. As my engineering support friends like to say, very often the diagnoses of technical troubleshooting is PEBCAC, meaning that the problem exists between the chair and the keyboard. For purposes of today's discussion, I'd alter this a bit to say that the problem exists between the data set and the eye. As long as people are making decisions, an epistemological bottleneck exists between the screen, between the monitor, and the consciousness that is observing it and that is trying to make sense of it. The challenge ahead for many of you in the audience is how to convert that bottleneck into not just a Rosetta Stone, but a Rosetta Stone that is immediately intelligible and engaging and even delightful to look at and interact with. At Observable, we talk a lot about the last mile problem in data analyses. There are different variations of the last mile problem in different disciplines and different modalities. For data analysis, the last mile is getting data from the data warehouse or the database or wherever else into the browser so that you can render a visualization, present insights, and allow exploration. Most of the work of visualization isn't visual encoding. It isn't the fun stuff. It's preparing the exact data set that you need to visualize. This could be writing a query or transforming data. One of the challenges of our space is linguistic and quasi-philosophical. We talk of seeing the data or the need to see the data, but in a very real sense, there is no the data. Each visualization requires specific data in a specific form at a specific time. The visualization is tied to a query, which is itself an act of algorithmic panhandling in which we seek to sift signal from noise. But what signal and in what form? I'll speak more about this panhandling in a moment, but first I just want to note a few things that are perhaps a little bit more pointed. The talk so far is perhaps a bit conceptual, so let me make a few concrete business observations from the past year. Number one, teams and companies are reliant on data. It seems commonsensical, but is worth talking through and discussing explicitly. Exponentially more data is being generated and collected every day. This talk is being recorded and transcribed across servers and thousands of miles. AI will be able to query it and summarize it for you, or even turn it into a more engaging podcast. For the most part, companies and businesses have an aspirational relationship to data analysis and to data visualization. They wish to use data to inform decisions and models at every level. And more people are working with that data than ever before, which is what makes the next observation all the more interesting for me, which is again that companies are dissatisfied with their current data visualization and dashboards. There is a persistent and growing frustration with the state of the art and a fear that somehow, and despite their investment of time and labor, Their tools, again, are not delivering the insights that they hoped for. There's a lack of commonplace understanding of what best practices are, given the nature of this data, which is often private, which is often proprietary, that might include trade secrets. There is a natural inhibition and restriction that enters into the equation with respect to sharing and learning from one another, which is something that, as I'll talk about in a moment, we must do a better job of. But why are these companies, businesses, and leaders and team leaders so frustrated? Why is it? Number one is that we see that visual data presentation often has minimal information relative to the space that is allotted to it, what we call low information density, or that the space allotted to it is disconnected from the information that is being displayed. Now, this shouldn't come as any surprise to the extent that companies, teams, and projects are using off-the-shelf tools that superimpose a pre-existing template upon data that may or may not want to look like that previously existing template. One of the real challenges of data visualization is that in order to gain an insight, we must enter into the fray without knowing exactly what it is that we're looking for, or even what form or design the visualization should take in order to give us that signal that we're looking for amidst the noise. And one of the issues that we have and that I hear about a lot is low information density. Second, out-of-the-box solutions most often have to sacrifice design catered to a particular use case or audience or data set in favor of broad agnostic applicability, leading to generic, ugly design. Most consumers of data analysis have been habituated to what is, in effect, the lowest common denominator. Data visualization is its most successful when it is engaging, when it's nice to look at, when it's interactive. And this issue of generic, ugly design is something that we need to fix. Third, people are interactive. We want to be able to manipulate a visualization, to zoom or to pan or to scrub. Most tools on the market don't allow for this. And indeed, interaction poses interesting and challenging development problems, and we must make our work more engaging. We see some of these limitations in continued work that we're doing here at Observable. Adding greater interactivity to plot is something that we want to be working more on in the new year. And this idea of limited interaction is something that all of us as practitioners similarly need to keep in mind. Fourth, existing tooling in data viz and dashboards often offer no in situ context. They lack memory. They lack comments. Current commercial data visualization and dashboards present information and present visualizations in isolation, divorced from the context within which they were originally collected. How can we as practitioners create a tighter bond between the viz, the data, and the context within which that data was initially collected or created? And finally, current data visualization and dashboards are slow. Data queries, for the most part, are run on load, leading to a bad user experience. Certainly for myself, I've worked at companies where there was a queue that you needed to set up in order to see your Salesforce report for the day, which would often take minutes, if not hours, in order to run. There's something fundamentally broken about not being able to have quicker and easier access to the visualization and insights that we need. So what's the answer? The first answer that comes to mind certainly is custom work. Whether it's notebooks, whether it's framework, whether it's plot, whether it's D3, we all, or many folks here on the call, are presumably aware of the value of custom work in building out custom data visualizations. But off-the-shelf frameworks are not specialized for dashboards or for data applications. Importantly, data warehouses are designed to scale efficiently, not to evolve quickly. Currently, custom work requires cobbling together many different technologies, including, critically, many different languages, which is a digression that I do want to speak to a little bit, because I think it's been a pretty significant observation over the course of the year, and something that we'll hear later on about from Allison and Tanya when they talk about different languages and the issues related to them. It's been very clear, working over the past year with customers and members of the community, that data visualization suffers from both a perceived as well as an actual language problem. This is the Tower of Babel here in the corner. And as we'll hear from Allison and Tanya later today, the development and implementation languages used and taught for data work, for data research, for data analysis and manipulation are usually quite different from JavaScript, which is your browser's language, and the language of the best suited to create top flight, state-of-the-art, performant, expressive visualizations. This year at Observable, we've taken a large step towards bridging this divide through the development of data loaders. Now, for those of you that aren't aware, observable frameworks, data loaders, let you pre-compute static snapshots of data at build time. Data loaders are programs that can be written in any language to access, wrangle, and analyze data. With data loaders, you can minimize data sent to the client and push bulky data processing behind the scenes to happen on build instead of on load. And that means that you don't have to choose between speed and richness. You can make fast data applications powered by any language on the back end with powerful interactive visualizations created in JavaScript on the front end. It's a massive innovation. It's a big step forward. We need to go further. We need to do more. So what would that look like? What do we do? Number one is that we need to accelerate the speed from noise to signal. This idea, again, of panhandling is as much a work of patience, a work of discipline, an act of rigor, as it is an act of coding or development or any kind of technical sophistication. One of the big themes for the company and for me and Mike going into the new year is, how do we accelerate the speed from noise to signal? How do we accelerate past the blank screen in order to get our community and really practitioners all over the world and operating in all sorts of different businesses, companies, teams, and projects to more quickly isolate what is actually valuable and what is actually actionable within their queries and within their data sets? The second thing that we have going into the new year that seems clear to us internally at the company is that we need higher level but still powerful tools. For instance, the move from D3 to Plot was a move from a lower level, incredibly powerful tool to a higher level one that, while it sacrificed a bit of performance, a bit of expressiveness, is nevertheless incredibly powerful in creating state-of-the-art data visualizations. But the barrier to entry with these tools still remains too high. Observable is committed in the new year to applying our expertise to this critical problem. Both of those will naturally lead to a third theme for 2025, which is the increasing democratization of visualization. This is easier to say than to implement. Here at Observable, we are hard at work on further democratizing visualization technology. As I said earlier, I see this as an existential necessity, not just for the core group of visualization developers and data practitioners that already exist in the world, but really on a civic level, on a societal level, on a global level. We need to have a greater Promethean effort that makes it easier for data researchers and analysts of all stripes to have a greater awareness of the visualization bottleneck cramping their work, and that is ultimately limiting the potential for insights and actionability of their data. We might be able to invest all the time and money into our data hygiene and into our project, But if it isn't engaging, if it isn't immediately recognizable, if it isn't interactive, it's not going to work. We need to be able to create technology, tools, and a platform that makes it much easier for practitioners of all sorts to have quicker, easier access to creating state-of-the-art expressive visualizations without the need for niche code mavens and for experts, which should lead to more data visualization. Again, this seems an obvious point, but I think that it's important to say explicitly. We've heard of, as I was working on these comments, I was thinking of headless BI, which is a data architecture that decouples the analytical backend from the so-called presentation layer. An alternative definition of headless BI is the separation of data storage, management, optimization, and access from the services that write, process, and query it. This is all well and good as a matter of architectural and engineering efficiency, even from a level of operational efficiency and hygiene, and works great for ensuring consistency of data throughout an organization or a supply chain. But headless BI means faceless BI, which means personality-less BI. And while in theory, Humpty Dumpty can be pieced back together by way of an intermediary so-called semantic layer and rules, the reality is that headless BI sacrifices underlying consistency for visual consistency, or the other way around, sacrifices visual consistency, expressiveness, and even awareness of what's going on for a cold, sterile, operational, engineering, architectural efficiency that necessarily does not take the human being sufficiently into account in its calculation. We need to raise awareness of something that is fundamentally commonsensical, which is that human beings see with their eyes and believe and understand what they see. And related to this, we need more creators of data visualization. This requires evangelizing as well as lowering the barrier to entry into the space. Observable has always benefited from a very rich and positive relationship with academics, with professors, with teachers all over the country and really all over the world. We need to place greater emphasis and investment in data visualization. There's a lot of work, and there are a lot of folks over the last several years who have looked for second careers, parallel careers, new careers entering data. And we know that there's a lot of opportunity there together with artificial intelligence and everything that's been going on over the last couple of years. However, again, if we're not placing the right amount of emphasis on data visualization, we will necessarily be restricting our ability to actualize and see through the potential that all of this data poses and posits that we ought to be able to extract. We need to balance science and art. And this is an important point, and I think that from a commercial standpoint and from a go-to-market standpoint is not always the easiest thing, I think, to be able to address and to manipulate and to take and to tackle head on. As a human-centric enterprise, data visualization is by definition both art and science. And rather than trying to circumvent that dichotomy, and rather than trying to eschew the responsibility and the difficulties of primarily that artistic part, that design element, we need to figure out better tooling that captures the dichotomy, that leans into that dichotomy by providing powerful and performant analytical tools built with enough room for creativity to allow for human expression, engagement, and intelligibility, but that do not require a designer's eye or an artistic aesthetic in order to work out fully and properly. This is a very interesting challenge posed by the space, and is something that Mike and I, and really a lot of the folks here internally at Observable, are continuing to work on, and we've got some exciting things that we'll be able to speak to you all about regarding this publicly in the coming months. Somewhere there is a business in need of a visualization that someone in our community knows how to build or that has already built. One of the challenges, one of the ways that we've thought about this historically is, should Observable be doing a better job of building out first-party visualizations, first-party data applications in order to make it easier for companies and projects or whatever it happens to be to get up and running? It doesn't make a lot of sense from a scaling standpoint. Observable is never going to be an expert, no matter how great our developers are internally, in creating visualizations that match all particular use cases and all of these different data sets. But guess what? There is someone out there in the world that has already done the work of figuring out what the best FP&A dashboard should look like, what the right burn rate visualization might look like, how we should be visualizing the amount of plastic that's floating around in the Sargasso Sea. In 2025, Observable is committed to beginning the work to better bridge this gap and to bring collective solutions to isolated commercial problems. As the constituents of that community, I call on all of you to raise awareness of the need for greater data intelligibility within your teams, companies, and projects. I look forward to today's presentations, as well as the fantastic work that you will all build in the weeks and months and years to come. Together, we can see beyond today's flatland and realize the potential of our accumulation of data in this multidimensional, interdimensional future that we are entering into. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy the conference. We do have time for questions if anyone has them. Sorry to call an audible to the organizers, but to the extent that folks want to chat about anything that I covered, I'm more than happy to address them. But thank you very much for your time and for listening.